the World Bank website. The World Bank website shows the data available on all countries. So here you have database where you have all sources, data from all sources. The main one is the World Development Indicators, and then you have education statistics. You have all kinds of statistics which you can change or select from depending on what you're working on. So, but usually most people work with the World Development Indicators if you're doing something on time series, mostly GDP, inflation, all kinds of variables you want. So you choose the database you want to go to, then you choose the country. In this case, we want to choose the UK. So we go to U. Can you see it?
Yes, I can see it.
And then choose United Kingdom. There it tells you here that selected is one. You've selected one country. Database, you've selected one database. We've not selected any series. Neither have we selected any time period, how many years we want to work on. So, and then you have the country. It tells you when you pick, it tells you which one you've selected. So let's go to the series now. So we want something on nuclear energy. So you can search there for nuclear, and then it brings out all the series on nuclear energy for the UK. So you see electricity production from nuclear sources. So you choose the one you want, and then another series you can search for is GDP. And there are so many variables that can represent GDP, and other variables that are measured as a percentage of GDP, like broad money, percentage of GDP, government debt, CO2 emissions. We want something on CO2 emissions as well. So let's take something on CO2 emissions. Kilogram per 2010 US dollar. And then we want CO2 emissions just the way it is. We just want ordinary emissions as well. And then there's energy intensity, all kinds of product measured as percentage of GDP. So here you have GDP as constant. You can choose that one. And you can as well choose GDP growth. That tells you the annual growth of GDP. You can choose annual percent of GDP per capita. That's another thing you can choose. So these are all measures of GDP. Then another thing we might want to look at is maybe trade, or that's external trade, that can measure like the that can measure the level of foreign earnings that come into the UK, like net trade. So it depends on whatever you're looking for. You can take your time, search through all the series, all the variables that is supplied here, and then the time period. So if you want for 50 years, you could choose for 50 years. If you want more than that, maybe 100 years, you could try to search for more years, like 1950, for example, and see if it has anything. There's no record. 1968. There's no, look at there's a record of 1968. So, but you can choose the years you want, and then you can see from here the country, the series, and the time has all been selected. So it means now you are ready to view your data. So apply changes. When you click that, it takes a while to bring the data out. Not so long, depending on how fast your internet is. So yeah, it's ready. So you come here, download options. Okay.
Yes.
and there are different formats. So Excel, let's see the data in Excel. So it downloads the data for you in Excel. And what World Bank does is, in Excel, they also supply what they call metadata. So the metadata is an explanation of the variables, how they measure it and what it means. So I'm going to open the data for us to see how it looks like. Okay, I might have to rename my data. So let's call this data UK. And then I try to open it now. So what you'll find in your Excel sheets is that you have the data in one worksheet. Here you have the data, and then you have the metadata. The metadata, as I said earlier, explains the meaning of the data set that you have. So this is our data. Let me try to zoom it. Can you see it?
Yes, I can see it.
So you have all your data sets in different time period. Then you come here to this worksheet that says series. So the series, what the series does is to explain what the data looks like. So for example, for this data, sources of electricity. So it tells you, for instance, what electricity production from nuclear sources means. What does it mean? So when you click the long definition, it says sources of electricity refer to the input used to generate electricity. Nuclear power refers to electricity produced by nuclear power plants. So if you want to see carbon dioxide emissions, for instance, CO2 emissions, it tells you what CO2 emissions is measuring. So when you click it, it opens the definition. You see, carbon dioxide emissions are those stemming from. So it just tells you what it means. Yeah, is that okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that's how to get data to Excel from World Bank development indicator. And as usual, what you do, I'll just show you how to then proceed, because it's not just sufficient getting the data. You need to be able to create something that makes sense. You need to be able to show to your reader a data set that makes sense. So I'm going to take electricity production from nuclear sources. I'll take CO2 emissions. I'll also take GDP. Yeah, I'll take GDP as well. Or I can take GDP per capita, because then you can see the growth rate. Yeah. So I'm just trying to format in a way that it looks good. So let me just take the recent years. Let me take data from 2000 for 10 years, the past 10 years, or the past. I'll just take. Let me just take the past. How many years now? 10 years. Yeah. So I'll take data from the past 10 years and try to see how it's going to look like. So electricity production from nuclear sources, that's the first one. And the second one is CO2 emissions. And the last one, so I have to take these two out. So what I'm just trying to do is to organize the data sets, arrange them in a way that it's going to suit what I want to plot on the graph. Yeah, 2006, 2007, 2008, because it has year. Why I'm editing it this way is because this is 2009 YR 2009. If I plot it on a graph, it's not going to make any sense. It's not going to work. It needs a series, a yearly series. Yeah. Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
So I have to do it in a way that it's, so this is me just editing the data set, trying to make it, trying to make sense of the data set. So now the data is ready for these variables and for this number of years. So I select them this way, yeah, and then I go to insert, and then I usually we just want to show the trend, how it has behaved, how these variables have behaved over the past 10 years. That's just what we want to show. So I choose this one or whichever one you want, depending on what you want. Are you with me? Can you say it? Are you there? Okay, so I'm just trying to show the trend. You notice that this variable is not properly fixed. The reason is because you have you're measuring, the scale of measurements differs among the variables. So I have to adjust the scale for this variable. I have to either use a combo to sort of like show how this variable behaves, and still there's a problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to rearrange the data set. So I pick this down and I just put that in the middle. So it's just for me, for the combo to work properly, I need to rearrange the data set. So now I go back to insert, and then I choose the scale this way, and then I play around with the sheet. This is just me playing around with the data. So I can change the chart type by doing a combo. So you see this way, there's a more variation in that combo. So what I want to do is for the variable that has a different scale, and that's yeah. So I want everything to be a line graph, so it's easier to compare. So what I want to do is to select this and change chart type for each variable, because I want everything to be a line, just for comparison's sake. So you could do as many things as you want in your chart. It doesn't really matter. So that's a very good example of how to plot and how to get your data from World Bank, get the metadata, the interpretation, take them to Excel, organize it in a way that you could plot a chart easily, and then do some editing and all, and then you could, of course, change different variables depending on the way you want to see it. So I hope that's able to help you. If you have any question, please just inbox me, okay?